All right, guys, talking about another big kind of theme in the beginning of a drawing class, which would be our line quality. So I like to start with things like proportion and how to build objects in a realistic way. But then I think of line quality and then soon line variety as like the icing on the cake. How clean can we make our lines? How much variety can we get within our line work? And we'll talk about that further. So I've got a few objects we're going to talk about this with. But just as a demonstration, when we talk about line quality, what we're talking about is obviously the quality of the line work that we've got. So when I think of it, I think of things like geometric lines. So if you have a cube or something like that, you're going to have very clean, sharp lines, right, that seem nice and straight. Versus, let's say, something jagged or rough, right? So I'm going to kind of shake my hand here and make a much rougher line. So that would be something more natural or organic. So definitely kind of machined versus organic, or organic versus geometric are two big ones. You could have kind of a broken line, almost like a dashed line, and there might be reasons why you would want that sometimes. Versus, maybe wavy, slow fades. This could be something like fabric. And you want probably a lot of that variety of different types of line to happen in the same drawing to showcase that there are different textures, there are different feels to each object, for sure. So let's look at that, what that might play out like in some of these objects. So I've got two different bricks, one that's a little rougher, one that's a little smoother, and I'll have these photos up. And then I've got a leaf. They're really light right now. I just did a very light pencil sketch underneath as like the structure lines. And then I'm gonna start to do some of the more like detailing with, I'm using pit pins right now. So just kind of artist quality pins. And I'm gonna use a really thin one to start out with. So I'm looking at my first image of a brick, which is a really well manufactured brick that's kind of more smooth and even. So more or less we're looking at a rectangular cube here. So there are definitely some bumps, and where I see this the most is at the bottom edge. So instead of being a perfectly precise and clean line, oh, you couldn't even see me draw that, but instead of being perfectly clean, I do see a little bit of jaggedness. So what I'm gonna do is force myself to go a little bit bumpy on the bottom edge of this brick. But more or less, it's still overall, one continuous line. I'm gonna go just a little bit of that here. But if you notice, I'm still trying to maintain a nice kind of geometric feel to this, because it feels like the closest thing in all of these images that I've included to nice, smooth, cleaner lines. Now, if you notice, I'm taking this pretty slow. I'm trying to take my time. Okay, so this would be one quality of line, and this one is a little more manufactured. It's obvious that somebody carved out this brick. I don't know how they make the bricks, but they did it in a really clean way. Okay, so that's one type of line right there. Let's look at our second image of a brick, which is a much more beat up, busted up brick. So I'll pull that image up next. This one has some similar types of things going on as far as the root shape, but around the edges, if you notice, the thing that makes this brick feel so much different is that you've got some really rough, jagged, sharp edges. So check out the way, and you'll have to be take your time and really try to observe this. You don't want to just fake it, because then it's not going to seem like the particular brick we're looking at. So I'm doing a lot to just see, where are these lines, how are they moving, what kind of texture do I feel like I need to achieve with my line work. Sometimes I see things that look like right angles, if you notice, like right here, and other times it's very wavy and bumpy, the lines that I'm making. But these are the pieces of basically busted brick, kind of, where the brick has been kind of gnarly on the edge, it's fallen, it's been beaten up. And if you notice, it's a much more jagged kind of a look that I'm giving it. So in the end, hopefully this would feel much more like a brick beat up kind of a texture overall than, say, if it was a 2x4, like a really clean edged piece of wood. Definitely more so than if it was like a stick of butter, maybe. If it was a stick of butter, it would have really smooth edges on the corners. So that's kind of my goal whenever I think about this, is what is the material I'm drawing, and can I make my lines feel like they reflect that material in any way. Once again, look at the corners. They're really rounded on this brick because they've been beaten up. So my original drawing was a little bit more rectangular, but now I'm really showing all of those chips. Okay, and this is tricky because we're not using shading. We're just trying to use the line to show the overall shape of this thing. All right, so hopefully we would, pretty much all kind of be in agreement that that feels much more clean, geometric, and manufactured. This feels like a rough and tumble, beat up kind of a style to this one, but it still has that form, that geometric form underneath. And now let's look at something like a leaf. This is kind of a dried out, fall leaf that you might see on the ground. So on this, there's a couple different things going on. You have like kind of the stem of the leaf that runs through. You've got the little veins that are tiny and really light. And then you've got the very jagged edges. It almost looks like saw blades on the edge of the leaf itself. So let's start with something like the main stem that runs through it. I see some shadow on the left side, so I'm going to start on the left side. This is actually a pretty clean line. I don't want to say it's perfectly straight, so I've allowed a little wobble for myself, but it's much cleaner than the outer edges, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. So that's the left side of the stem. It comes to the end of that stem and widens out. This would be the right edge. And that stem is going to keep getting smaller and smaller as we work our way toward the tip of the leaf. And for now, I'm just going to let it kind of dwindle out over there. So that's a good starting point. That's the stem of that leaf. Kind of clean, more precise lines. When I get to the outer edges, I still want them to feel bold, but this is where there's all these little grooves. And I'm trying to aim for the right amount of spacing. You don't want to put 375 of these little notches if you don't really see that many. So I'm trying to at least, I haven't counted them, but keep the spacing kind of similar to make it feel like it's in the right ballpark. Now some of these are more noticeable than others. So you might get one notch that's a little bit bigger than another on these little, they almost look like teeth again. Sometimes they're going to be a lot smaller. I never want to make these feel like I have a perfect, kind of a perfect routine going, because it's nature. And then that's the thing about organic lines, is that you're never going to see one leaf that looks 100% exactly the same as the other. So we're trying to replicate kind of nature's randomness, which is really, really hard to do actually. So notice sometimes I have a bigger one of these waves or teeth, sometimes much smaller. That's the way I'm kind of seeing it in real life. Let's go all the way to the tip here. So got the point of that leaf. More of those kind of saw blade pieces. All right, not bad. So again, you can see a very different texture to this versus this kind of rough broken feel, and then the clean over here. On top of this, you're gonna have like even more textures when we get to the vein of the leaf. And the vein, it's almost like a lightning bolt or a branch of a tree, but there's a slight wobble to it. So what I do is I let my hand actually start to, like, I guess tremble or kind of go a little bit jittery. I don't know if you guys are like this, but when I go to make a line, my natural state isn't to be able to make a perfect line. I have to kind of muscle that in. If I go slowly, my hand kind of wants to vibrate just a little bit. So let me zoom in on that just so you can see what I mean. So if I go kind of quick, I can get a pretty clean, precise, flat line. If I do that really slow, my hand tends to want to wobble a little bit. So I'm just accentuating that wobble and kind of letting my hand go a little bit jittery. And that is going to make much more of what feels like kind of a natural lightning bolt or tree branch sort of a shape. So that's what I'm trying to do just a little bit of in the vein of those leaves. Okay, beautiful. So that's a little bit of an idea of the quality of the line that we'd be using, a variety within the quality of the line. We're going to talk about line variety even more in the next video.